Well, I believe that a teacher's duty is to impart everything he knows. That way, the martial arts can be passed on.
All right, so it's finally fender time. What's this thing finally gonna look like? Had Dan working on the rear fenders, and they sort of wrote themselves, right? Because we make the fender flush with the outside edge of the tire, and then we gave it 4 inches of travel up in here, so the wheel as it tracks will sort of cut back on an angle and track inwards and not hit the lip, and we're good there. We got lots of room here. So this sort of just made itself. Of course, we extended this down, and this will get cut eventually, but we need to still fix the lower rotten quarter on it, but you get what's going on there. But the front is definitely a head scratcher. But with the same thing on the rear, we needed that minimum opening, so here we are. We created the same opening. We could have lifted it up a little bit, but I think it would look weird. So we want the two to match, right? So that's where the fender has to be. Same thing, once the wheels were aligned, we were able to put a board across the wheel and align the fender to the outside edge of the rim. So, but that leads me to the next part, the front section here. So here we are. The fenders are literally just ticky-tacked in place right now so we can get a better look at it. But because the body's so low and the fenders are so high and the wheels are so big, the fenders are now nowhere near the original spot. And we have a concern here with the upper control arm potentially popping through this spot here. So the first idea was to lift the fender up to compensate for that, but it starts to look goofy and we're into like 6 inches of tire to fender clearance there, so that's not going to happen. So Dan made up some cardboard. That looks kind of like this. So I think what we're going to do is triangulate this thing off. Let me just tape this thing down here with one hand. Boop, 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 and boop. Something like that. So we'll bring the fender flat top over to match the body there, right? And then where it angles back, we'll have this really cool angle that, you know, brings the fender up. How else to do that? And we'll end up rolling this corner or rolling this edge and bringing that down. So this angle here looks like sort of what you see on the back of the fenders here, right? So we'll take this roll, cut it into it, and roll along. So that part will look factory. We're playing with angles here that also work with the rest of the angles over the whole thing. And so we have lots of room here now between the logo and the fender to put the intercooler stacks in there, right? Because we got 2 intercoolers to go in there. So I think that'll work out all right. But what I do have a problem with is that headlight location. These things are so far apart and this car is so low, it's starting to look like, I don't know, Jar Jar Binks or something in there. Anyway, I'm sure it's just an optical illusion because center to center of the headlight right now is 58 inches. And if you measure any other vehicle, they're about the same. So I guess it's not that bad. Oh yeah, this part. So see my chicken scratches here. We're gonna make this area rise and join into this section here in the same way that the signal mounts do. So this part rises up and it's got a crown on the top. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll rise this up and then have a crown on the top to allow for the suspension upper control arm to travel inside of. So that's the plan anyway. So let's do some more mocking up and see if we can get this thing looking more complete.
You're pretty good. But your style is no match for mine.
All right, welcome back to our winter wonderland. It's time for another GTR update. We've been hard at work working on the fenders and extensions for the rockers and so on. So I figured it was time for an update before we carry on to the next stage. So here we go. That's where we are now. It's got a pretty wide stance to her. That's for sure. Lots of work. Let me just put this down for a minute. There we go. Lots of work getting these fenders extended, and also the rocker repairs here. A normal thing has 2 ribs, but because the GTR was a little bit lower, we decided to add another rib and just extend it down. So that's actually the bottom of the floor pan on the GTR there. You can see that there or not, but you get the gist. So, and then had to widen the fenders to match the face of the wheels there. So basically, you can see in some of the time-lapse photos there, we attached a board to the wheel and used that as the guide to bring the fenders out to. And then we were able to just fill in the gaps, and that worked out actually quite well. Rear bumper's on, and we've stretched that to match the original profile, and also to give us kind of a step there in case I don't know, we need to hop in the back or something. Don't know, but we needed a good way to solve that issue, so it's all good. The front, we still have to do I kind of dig this a lot actually, the way this angles back down there. We still have to deal with where the upper control arm is going to come through the fender here, but we sort of have a good detail here of the turn signal rise, and we'll probably do something just like that here. Just haven't got there yet. But today is actually interior day. So this is where we are right now. I was starting to mock up all this wiring and getting it back into the hole. And we sort of located some of the, where the fuse panel goes and the computer goes, etc. But after looking at the wiring and realizing we wanted to plug in the infotainment unit back into the car, we were like, well, obviously gonna have to modify the dash, gonna have to build some sort of metal surround to hold this in. But then I realized, well, this plug plugs into the back of this unit. And we weren't really gonna run a radio, but to not have any issues, and that sort of goes there, and that screen plugs into this unit, and this unit plugs into that unit. I guess this is probably the GPS and the radio brain, and then we have these switches as well, which are the the launch controls, etc., which we need to run this as well. This, let's see if I can do this with one hand. So we got the radio controls. Move the coffee. This would plug into the bottom of that there, and then the screen sort of attaches here like that, and they all plug into the center unit underneath. And I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to attach all this stuff together? I'm working on the dash unit as well. How am I going to attach all this stuff together and then make it flow into that? And I was like, well, what if we just cut the center out of this dash? So I brought the dash back in. Let's haul this over here. So there it is here. But I was like, well, what if I just cut the center out of the dash and take that and stick it in there, and then I can just graft, metal or aluminum or what have you to the sides of it to make it all flow and work. I tell you what, let me stick that in the hole. Totally fits like a glove. Not really, doesn't fit like a glove at all, but sort of see what I'm going for here. If I cut that center section out of the dash, recess it back in there so it doesn't hit the shifter, and sort of get this edge to flow into the original dash, then I think I've got a good way of mounting all those systems back in place there. So let's do some time lapse and see if I can get this thing cut in place. got the dash roughly cut where I needed it. You can still see that I need to trim the glove box door of the thing to push this back in, but when I shortened the GTR, there was a little tab here that holds the base of the dash, so I'm still able to bolt the bottom of the dashboard in to the same relationship as to where the shifter is located. So that should fit fine in there. And then the height of it, I'm sort of just looking at it while you look at it as well, so we can sort of see how this thing's going to fit together. But those are the two tabs there that hold that in place. And that's higher than the dashboard, but I think that's fine. So I'm going to cut that and maybe French this in as far back as I can get it, and then I can build a little metal frame around this or something. Yeah, so I'll keep sticking this thing in there until it won't go back any farther, and then we'll reassess. Want that to fall. Take you out.
I'm very interested to test your skill.
All right, so it's actually not looking too bad here. So let's show you the close-up here, what's going on. So this is how I put the head unit, the GPS unit, the radio unit back in there so I could see how the curvature of the floor was going to work with it. We have just enough clearance between those two, so that's not going to hit. The bottom of the dash unit is bolted to the floor there. It needs to come back a little bit more, but you see where it's hitting here now is the brackets that holds the screen to the plastic casing is hitting on the dashboard. So I think I'm going to relocate these screws here on both sides. So it looks like I have enough material to do that. And then I'm probably going to notch the dashboard and bring that back and in. And this is the rubber seal for the window. The window closes up against this. So I have a little bit of room here, and we're not using the defrost anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? So I'm going to angle that back a little bit more. And first I need to get the alignment vertical because it slightly leans towards the driver. And just want to make sure I'm on the right angle there. I'm trying to replicate how it is in the GTR. But that's not too bad. You can imagine the dashboard sort of flowing in there and on the other side. I don't know what's going to, if I'm just going to keep the original thing glove box or maybe modify that yet. Don't know. But I can easily get rid of these black foam sides and skirt that in aluminum and screw it to the floor and to the new dash, etc. It might actually work out quite well with the new console for the steering column as well. I don't know. TBD on that one still, but let's do some more cutting and see if I can get that in there. Well, I gotta say I'm actually quite impressed with that. So, looking at it now, this plate is bolted in tight, so it's at the exact angle that the original GTR was mounted in, and you can see it's just got a little bit of play there. So the monitor's not actually hitting on the dash, it's just sort of floating there. I'll have to make some mounts on the back of the screen in the original mounts to hold it in there so it doesn't shake, but I don't know if you saw when I was mocking up the steering column as well. I've got a good amount of gap between there and the instrument cluster and the steering column. So I think that's not too bad. That was actually a really good solution for running all that original stuff in there. I think when it comes time for making the dash, the back of the window frame actually covers quite a bit of this, but I think I'll still make a metal cover for this and maybe just bring the dash out and extend it around the missing parts here just to finish it off. Passenger side, I don't know, let's see. Well, still going to retain this glove box, I think. I'll build a wall here and somehow attach this to it. I'll probably end up pulling this foam off. I don't know. If I pull the foam off, then I can build an aluminum panel or a steel panel, something that's removable, and attach it down to here. Or maybe, because I have the original GTR center console, would be to run all that plastic back on there. So maybe I'll just make a cap. I don't know. Got to figure that one out yet. But I think I'm just going to keep attaching this in there. Yeah. See where she ends up. Alright, so I was thinking about the mounts for the center dash unit last night. And originally I was just going to make some mounts off the back of the, or use the existing mounts off the back of the screen here and mount it to the inside of the dashboard assembly of the thing. But then I remembered I had the entire dash assembly here with the mounts that hold the center console in place. So I think I'm going to cut these off and make new mounts back to the firewall so I can screw that in and keep it mounted securely in there. And that way it should remove any of the flex and whatnot. But look how rusty this thing is. It's crazy. All that rust, like this is up inside the dashboard, even behind all the panels. And obviously this thing isn't painted when it leaves the factory, and it's just so oxidized. And I think this is just from the water that was inside the cab, and then it was sealed up again. Crazy. Anyway, it's no good to anybody else, so I'm just gonna cut those two brackets off, mount them in there, weld them to the car, and then we'll revisit.
Not bad. What's that style? It's new. It's mine. Mantis.
All right, so now that the center console has been mounted into the thing, you can see the metal brackets in there. So that's all in there pretty secure. And in fact, I was able to reuse the rear half of the center console and little plastic covers and stuff like that. But I can't use the side panels, and of course I already had to butcher the dash. So I think the plan there would be, on both sides, would be to get rid of the last of the dash coverings here, then make some aluminum covers. But I can't do that because I still have a mountain of computers and wiring to go through there yet. So that's on hold. But I think it's time to work on the steering column and get that mounted up and in there, because obviously I can't do all that when the wiring's in there. So this is what's left of the GTR column now. This is the old one. And inside of the, I guess the GTR column used to have a slider so you could telescope in and out and it would pivot. Simplified all that. I just removed the steel column from inside the GTR column, and then using the front bearing, I still have to make a rear bearing for that. See how that sort of used to slide in and out on the spline there. Yeah, make a new bearing landing for this. I had to replicate the instrument cluster mount so it would fix to this aluminum, so I just made a mount welded to the steel tube so I can still run the original plastic coverings on the dash unit when it's all set in there, or the column unit. So once that was mocked up, I can then put it in the car and sort of hold on to it, but I realized I don't know where that's going to go because I still haven't got the seat mounted. So that's the original VW thing seat, and I think that's the way to go because you can see this bulkhead here, which limits the rearward travel of that seat. So the thing seat looks better with the thing, and it's smaller than the original GTR seat, so I can move it back a little bit farther. So I think that's the way to go. In fact, now that I have some seat tracks, I can actually go ahead and mount that seat in there. So let's get the seat mounted, and then we'll get the seat mounted, then we'll come back and revisit where that has to go.
We teach everything we know. One day we'll starve. I'm sorry. I will decide how I teach.
just like that, the seat mounts are in. So I just welded some 1x2 on the floor there, across the gaps there. I also wanted to leave the cavity in the floor in case we run in the original audio system, because it had an amp underneath the floor here. So yeah, those are welded in. Let's mount the seat. Did I mention this thing stinks? Kind of a musty old Volkswagen smell on the seat, you know? Anyway, we'll get these recovered one day. Should track, all right? All right, let's start working on the steering column now. All right, so now that the steering column is mounted in there, sort of get a better look at what that's going to look like. I tried to mimic the angle of the steering column to the bottom of the dash, which happens to be the same angle as the original steering column. So that's in there, and the distance of the steering wheel is sort of dictated by the back of the chair and how far back I can get the seat. There's two more positions you can angle the seat backwards, so I tried to put it in a good position as if you're all the way forward in the chair, so you can actually lean your arm on the side of the door opening, or the door, so you can actually steer it. So I think that's a pretty good spot. I have the original plastics for the top of the instrument cluster, although I'm not sure how it's going to work, or I just make something new out of aluminum and then tie the center console in there as well. So now I need to start making some brackets to hold that secure. And once it's in place, then I can start making the new U-joints and steering joints in there. So let's get making some brackets and take another look at it.
I realize I still can't break through your armor, but I can find your weak spot, and I will. Attack the opening! Attack the groin!
All right, now that the passenger seat's in, I'll show you what we did with the steering column here. So you can see the instrument cluster and the wheels on there. Now that I put the cover on, you can see that it totally gets in the way of where the windshield's going to go. And the windshield wiper motor on the VW thing is right in the window right here. So this is gonna have to be modified, and the windshield wiper motor's gonna have to be relocated. But I do like how this cover offers some sunshade in there, but it's too big, so I'll probably just cut the back of this off, or maybe trim this down, remove this cover. Like, I'm not going to use any of these switches anymore, right? So reduce that in size so it doesn't look so heavy up here, and come up with a new dash cover, probably, I don't know, probably out of aluminum, I guess. But in the meantime, I have a whole pile of wiring to mount. Yeah, that's the part that just goes underneath the dash. That's the passenger side, and then I still have another whole driver side loom that goes down this side of the car for the transmission. And then I still have to hook up the steering U-joints and stuff yet, but you don't need to be here for that. But in the next episode, we're probably going to do the parcel tray slash, what's that? Seat back, strut tower, brace, and the probably put some sort of parcel tray back here. And clean this up, cut this down. And then we're probably gonna move on to the intercoolers. So now that the front's in, the fender's on, I can come up where the bumper location is going to be, come up with some intercooler mounts, and start thinking about the lines that are gonna go to the random, or to the various places across the engine top there. And then we can finally start working on the hood. So we're getting there, chipping away at it. Biggest to smallest, bit by bit, right? Either way, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, subscribe. Thanks very much for watching.
Any time that you want another lesson here, I'll oblige you. That's any time at all. Goodbye.